thanks everyone for coming out. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I observed around Caracas, and we will show you some of our video. You can see all of our work at thegrayzone.com. That's G-R-A-Y, and it's not a hair club for men. It's a news site. Just as a disclaimer, we took no government funding at any point in our reporting on Venezuela, and or in coming here. Nicole has sponsored our trip along with myself. I've paid partly out of pocket to come here because it's so important for me to have this audience. I arrived in Caracas in early February with the expectation of witnessing at least some mild version of the dystopia that Western media has made out Venezuela to be. What I found instead was a society coping with an economic crisis, to be sure, brought on by speculation, hyperinflation, and tightening U.S. economic blockade, but one that was coping nonetheless. I came from Washington, D.C., where I live in one of the city's most neglected, impoverished communities in southeast Anacostia, whose residents are struggling to remain in their homes against rising rents and declining wages, and where I witnessed literally thousands of men and women sleeping in the streets every day just blocks from the White House. And, you know, coming from there, the situation around Caracas scarcely resembles a humanitarian crisis, at least as I understood it, especially after having worked so long inside and writing about the Gaza Strip, which is still under occupation and is the target of a project of Israeli apartheid. That's a real humanitarian crisis. It is a man-made humanitarian crisis. And speaking to my friend Tarek Lubani, who also works on Gaza, and hearing about the situation and having him tell me, well, it's slightly better. We now have 8 hours of electricity a day. That gives you a sense of the kind of double standards that we're operating from. Around Caracas, I witnessed scenes of community and humanity that were scarcely conveyed by Western media intent on demonizing Venezuela, which were generally enabled thanks to state intervention. I visited the Gran Misión Vivienda, a massive complex constructed according to Jane Jacobs' model of a mixed-use urban development that was built on a military base that provides affordable housing to some 20,000 families. It was constructed under the watch of the late President Hugo Chavez, and it's at the heart of a largely successful government plan to provide free or affordable housing to 3 million families by this year. At Comuna Panal, a government housing collective which is home to some 3,500 families high above Caracas, I witnessed a performance of Afro-Venezuelan music at a school that provides free music instruction to young children. The opposition-controlled National Assembly has introduced the housing privatization law to unravel and destroy these achievements in housing. This law is rejected by 61% of Venezuelans, yet it is at the heart of self-declared interim President Juan Guaido's agenda. It represents a nightmare for the millions who gained homes under the Bolivarian Revolution. Each week, the municipal government of Caracas hosts open-air food markets around the city to provide affordable food and sanitary supplies to poor and working-class residents. And as you'll see in the video that we show after Anya's presentation, the markets sell a variety of state-subsidized food at well below market value. The markets are complemented by the food distribution program known as CLAP, which has been heavily criticized by the opposition and the Western media that embeds among it, which they call it an instrument of state control. Yet the program provides 1 to 2 weeks worth of food virtually for free, 12 cents a box, along with sanitary supplies. Erica Ferias, the mayor of Caracas, told us that the government plans to double its distribution of the CLAP boxes to twice a month. The opposition has placed the CLAP program in its crosshairs as well, as it has announced plans to sell off the country's state oil company, which makes such programs possible. In order to generate the narrative of a humanitarian crisis, Western outlets like CNN have routinely claimed that basic foodstuffs are simply unavailable in Venezuela, that you, for example, can't even find toothpaste or toothbrushes. As you will see in our video at the end, that is a titanic lie. The problem isn't food availability, but the buying power of the Venezuelan public, which proposed U.S. sanctions on Visa and MasterCard aim to weaken even further. At a supermarket in the affluent neighborhood of Altamira, I was able to find everything I get at home in Washington, D.C., including toilet paper scented with chamomile and aloe vera. Relaxing. Nearby were sushi and juice bars, yoga studios, restaurants of every variety, and shopping malls where the latest luxury products and spa services were readily available. Touring the upscale areas of eastern Caracas offers a window into the irony of Venezuela's polarized politics. These bubbles of wealth are opposition strongholds, and while food is plentiful, you are most likely to hear calls for humanitarian intervention in these quarters. On February 12th, we witnessed a large opposition rally headlined by self-declared interim President Guaido, who called for the U.S. to deliver aid from Colombia against the wishes of Venezuela's government. Protesters there told me and my colleagues that the rallies had actually grown smaller than in past years, and that because there was less opposition on energy on the streets, all hopes were linked to Donald Trump's promise of external intervention. U.S. media and politicians focused in on an image of the Tienditas Bridge between Colombia and Venezuela, which you can now put on screen. Puedes poner imagen 1. I hope this is right. And here you see a tweet by Mike Pompeo, who is our Secretary of State. And this is the Tienditas Bridge. They neglect to mention, in focusing in on this image, that Venezuela has accepted millions of dollars of aid from organizations like the Red Cross and nations that agree to coordinate with it, like Russia. And that the Tienditas Bridge has actually been off limits to all traffic since it was built in 2015. This is not something that is new. And part of the reason that it's off limits, according to government officials I spoke to, is that Colombia refuses to coordinate customs with the Venezuelan government. There's a black market. There are all kinds of things coming across the border. It's ironic when Donald Trump wants open borders, isn't it? The opposition's plan for humanitarian intervention culminated with an international media extravaganza at the Santander Bridge, not far from the Tienditas Bridge, between Colombia and Venezuela on February 23rd. The attempt to ram trucks across the border loaded with a few $1 million worth of boxes provided by the U.S. Agency for International Development, for Aid and International Development, with no program for distributing the aid, was quite transparently a provocation aimed at generating the political escalation necessary to stimulate a wider U.S. intervention. And it failed in dramatic fashion, as the violent hooligans ferried by Colombian security services onto the bridge wound up burning the aid trucks with their own Molotov cocktails. At the Grayzone, we were branded as conspiracists for being among the first English language outlets, perhaps the first, to report the fact that the opposition had burned the aid trucks itself. Meanwhile, everyone from Senator Marco Rubio to Colombian President Ivan Duque to USAID Director Mark Green to New York Times correspondent Nicholas Casey falsely blamed Maduro for burning the aid trucks. 2 weeks later, the New York Times wound up confirming what we at the Grayzone had already reported, exposing the U.S. public to one of the many deceptions at the base of the push for regime change in Venezuela. The deceptions continued through the electricity blackouts that hit Venezuela on March 7th, just days after Juan Guaido's return from Colombia, when the hydroelectric plant at Guri Dam was mysteriously collapsed. U.S. correspondents have dismissed the government's claim of sabotage as more conspiracism, even as substations subsequently exploded and oil facilities blew up in the Orinoco Belt. At the Grayzone, I reported on a stunningly cynical memo produced in 2010 by the U.S.-funded soft power outlet known as Canvas, which was responsible for training Juan Guaido and his cadre as youth activists. The memo, authored by Sergej Popovich, who is now rector at St. Andrews University somehow, advised them to exploit looming electricity failures to create a quote-unquote watershed event that would, quote, likely have the impact of galvanizing public unrest in a way that no opposition group could ever hope to generate. Disturbing. I want to show you an image from another deception, which is upon us today and this week from Reuters, image 2. And this Well, you can see what it says. It says, desperate Venezuelans swarm sewage drains in search of water. The Venezuelans are just so stupid or dirty that they just are willing to drink sewage, something no people would do. Actually, the image shows people drinking from an underground freshwater spring that flows into the Guaire River, which many Caracas residents rely on regular occasions, even not during blackouts. As our friends at Venezuela Analysis pointed out, the framing of the photo by Reuters and other embedded outlets was an insult to the poor and working people of Venezuela, suggesting, again, that they were stupid or crazy enough to drink raw sewage. Sorry, it didn't happen. In fact, poor and working class Venezuelans that we spoke to and who most strongly resist the U.S. coup have been imbued with a consciousness that is consistently underestimated in Washington. They have resisted an economic war that's growing more relentless by the day, and they understand that the opposition intends to return them to a time when they were totally politically and economically excluded from their own society. That's why the coup has failed so far, because of them, and why it may never succeed. I hope our friends at the counter event take recognition of that. I'm here on behalf of the American majority, the United States American majority that favors diplomacy and dialogue over economic warfare. And I'm here to add my voice to Professor DeZayas' call for the United Nations to invoke Article 96 and refer unilateral coercive measures like U.S. sanctions to the International Court of Justice to be investigated as a war crime. In the meantime, I and my colleagues will continue to investigate and destroy the deceptions deployed each day to stimulate wars of regime change and interventions behind the false guise of humanitarian concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max, for bringing some fresh air in this house and for generally for the brave investigative work you are doing. We all know that countering mainstream narrative at the East Coast.
Thank you.
Now Max was saying that they have a short video, 6 minutes video with some images that they collect in Caracas. We now show this video before giving the floor to Lucrecia.
We are in Parroquia Macarao in the outskirts of Caracas at a food market where food is being sold below market value, subsidized by the city of Caracas, overseen by the mayor of Caracas. And you can see behind me is toothpaste. Here you have all the basic foodstuffs, pasta, flour. They're focusing on protein here, so you have a fish stand and it's being sold well below market rate. And here we have ground up chicken made in Venezuela, which is being sold for about $1.25 or 3,800 bolivares. And then over there are packages, large packages of meat. And back here you can see all the vegetables. And also what you can see are train tracks, because there's an actual metro system in Caracas that services this community. The infrastructure is actually pretty decent. So sardines and vegetable oil here, more protein. And this is the bread stand. It's really cheap. So it's being sold, the large breads are being sold for 2,000 bolivares, which is less than $1 for all that bread. You can get 2 of these for 50 cents. And bread with coconut is being sold for less than $1, about 75 cents. She's taking away a fat bag of food.
We're in a barrio of Caracas called Los Jardines del Valle. We're waiting with a group of people who are here for CLAP. It's a government program in partnership with community groups that distributes a box of basic food goods every single month. The government says that this feeds about 6 million families in a country of 30 million people, and we're here with some of those who are waiting today for their boxes. Okay. And what should people outside of Venezuela know about the food situation right now? Is it fair to say, as we often hear, that there is a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela?
Bueno, básicamente una crisis humanitaria no existe. Hay una crisis de distribución de alimentos. Hay una crisis de especulación de los costos de los alimentos, pero alimentos hay. se pueden conseguir, pero los precios es lo que nos tiene atosigados, lo que no nos permite acceder a ellos, pues.
So one resident who received the clap bag has let us borrow it just to show you what's in it. All the products here are made in Venezuela, and we also see we have some soybean oil, and this soybean oil apparently is made by the government of Venezuela.
I'm Anya Parampil reporting from Simón de Bolívar Square in Caracas, where thousands of Venezuelans have been waiting in line for hours to sign an open letter to the American public denouncing U.S. intervention and aggression against their country.
Allá dicen que nos estamos muriendo de hambre, no, nosotros no nos estamos muriendo de hambre, que nosotros estamos peleando entre nosotros, no, que digan la verdad de lo que está pasando, ¿verdad? Porque nosotros aquí le elegimos un presidente, no a Guaidó que está por allá, no, aquí elegimos a un presidente con voto. ¿Ve? Y lo proclamó el pueblo.
Bueno, ellos están quedando mentiras porque yo estoy viendo que el pueblo está apoyando a Nicolás Maduro. Veo que la gente está viniendo a su firma, porque en verdad que bueno, sí, el país está en crisis, pero también es por el bloqueo que tienen los otros países hacia el país.
Yo estoy aquí por la paz. Yo quiero firmar por la paz, porque yo no quiero que haya ningún intervencionismo aquí.
Nosotros vamos a firmar para eso, para que no venga esa guerra aquí.
Aquí no queremos guerra, aquí lo que queremos es paz y felicidad y amor.
Sabes que el país está difícil es por la guerra que nos tiene. Aquí elegimos un presidente con votos, que es Nicolás Maduro. Que cese ya la guerra y la violencia hacia el socialismo, por favor, que queremos paz.
We're at a supermarket in Caracas called Gama. This is cheeses. There's a lot of cheeses and meats here. People here like meat, and there's a lot of meats. Okay, we got like congealed meat. We got like so much meat. There's a lot of meat here. I mean, a lot of tomato sauce. You can see the aisles are pretty full of stuff. I mean, they got a whole aisle for pasta. A lot of people love yogurt here. Man. There's energy drinks, all kinds of drinks. Sugars. Got my toilet paper. This toilet paper has chamomile. Manzanilla's chamomile. This is the fruit section. We got a lot of mangoes. There's actually a lot of new beers coming onto the Venezuelan market. They're kind of getting into craft beer. Got wine, a good decent wine section. They have some Chilean wines here.
I'm Max Blumenthal here in the Chacao district, very affluent area of Caracas, for a major opposition demonstration on the 5th anniversary of the Guarimba protests. And people are here, they've just seen Juan Guaidó speak, they're very fired up. And the main call here is for humanitarian aid. And so you're calling for humanitarian aid.
Of course, that we need it.
Right, we need it, we need it. We are in a lot of need.
Are you hungry?
Yes.
What would you eat?
Well, anything that I have in my house, but I have to work all day long.
Yeah.
And then go out to find something to buy.
And the prices are too high.
Very high, very high. It's like a bunch of kale. It costs 6,000 bolívares.
Sin embargo, yo tengo aquí como una hora y he visto pasar gente en sillas de ruedas. Las tallas, te invito a ver la talla de mi pantalón. Yo he perdido más de 10 kilos en 2 años.
Protestando porque queremos vivir en libertad, vivir en democracia. Y si no manifestamos, y si no nos ven que estamos disgustados, la gente piensa que estamos bien, como dijo la reportera, que aquí no hay ningún problema porque hay McDonald's y hay para todo.
Thank you for sharing this brilliant reporting. It would be funny if this wasn't used as a pretext for military intervention in Venezuela.